I had a completely sleepless night before work one day, and I was a mess. It spiraled very quickly for me. I was up all night, all the hyper arousal, my heart racing, sweating, like almost having hot flashes, obsessing over the time, obsessing over what my next day would be like a lot of us. My next day's ruined. It's going to be terrible. How am I going to work? How am I going to do this? I was really panicked. I was very emotional. I was crying all the time. And when I say all the time, I mean all of the time I was crying. I have never cried more. I can smile about it now, but it truly was the worst thing I've ever been through, really the darkest. I'm so grateful for the content that you put on there. It's free. That's like unheard of. And I knew you are a good person. You have a good heart for you to be doing this and putting this content. You genuinely want to help people. So I just really thank you for that, because I really appreciate that. You gave me my life back. I'm so grateful for you and all the coaches and community of Sleep Coach School.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another special Talking Insomnia episode. We have Brittany with us. Welcome.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I can't wait to share your story with our community. And just speaking of the community, just one quick line on how this happened. Well, I sent this broadcast in a newsletter asking anyone if they're willing to be a guest, and you replied. And so that's how this came to be. Well, with that said, yeah, tell us in your words, Brittany, how did you start having trouble sleeping?
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to start from the beginning as early as I can. Ever since I was a child, I wouldn't say I had insomnia, but I've always had a bit of somnophobia, or fear of falling asleep. I even remember being at sleepovers and just being, talking to my friends and being like, aren't you guys a little afraid of falling asleep? And you know what? I've always been a very vivid dreamer, which I'd love to ask you a question about later if I can remember. I've always been a very vivid dreamer. And I would ask them and they'd be like, enough, go to sleep. No, I'm not afraid of going to sleep. So, I never had struggled with insomnia, but it was in my head as a kid for sure. So then, moving forward, way forward to around 2016. And this period is a little bit fuzzy. It's just, I wouldn't say that was my big one, but it definitely stood out as an experience with insomnia for the first time. So in 2016, we lost our housing out here, my fiance and I, and we had to move into a 2-bedroom condo with my parents, and I was working a lot, and it was just a really stressful time for me. I started not being able to fall asleep at night. And this has been the main issue for me, this onset insomnia throughout this process. And I work really early in the morning. I do stand-up paddleboard tours out here in Maui. So it's a lot of really early mornings before the wind comes in. So a lot of times my alarm would be set for 4:30 in the morning. So, I would lay there and I would think, I only have 5 hours. I only have 3 hours. And I would become very hyper aroused. So all the classic symptoms, I would be sweating, my heart racing, palpitations, I would be obsessively checking the time, crying, which was my biggest thing throughout this journey, with a lot of crying. And I was calling out of work left and right. And I started problem solving, immediately started problem solving. I would say I'm definitely the standard perfectionist kind of type A personality that tends to find so fascinating what goes with this journey. And I started with the melatonin, the supplements. I started NyQuil, Benadryl. I think I even took an Ambien from a friend at the time. And, sometimes things would work and then they wouldn't. And there was, I had a stomach virus around that time. And typically if I had a stomach virus, I would just ride it out. And, that was that. But I was so fearful that I wasn't sleeping that I went to the hospital. And at the hospital, I remember being like, all this is happening, but really my big concern is that I'm not sleeping. So is something, is this, what's happening? Can you do something? And they didn't take it seriously and they didn't do anything to help me. So
yeah, no, sorry to interrupt, but were you going mainly to the hospital, did you tell them I'm here because I can't sleep, or I'm here because I have a stomach virus?
I told them both. I did have a stomach virus. I was getting sick. But again, that's not something I would go to a hospital for standardly. So this was really in the back of my head of what's wrong. Something is very very wrong right now physically. I really, really thought it was, up until this last year, a physical issue. So, I kind of tried to remember what happened after that. I know I did the whole 30 eating plan that's supposed to like balance your hormones and do all these things. I thought it was hormonal for a while there. I ended up taking a THC tincture or cannabis tincture, and I've been a long-term cannabis user, which does kind of weave into my story. But I also started going to a naturopath, and we were doing treatment for parasites, and we were doing cleansing, and all of these things, which are great things, they're helpful things. It's not that that's bad, but that just wasn't, the solution to this problem. So, yeah, it's a little bit fuzzy, but I gradually just started sleeping again. And I know I would have a random off night. I don't know if it was the delegation of the tincture, or I don't really know what it was, but things kind of smoothed out, and I went back to sleeping. And for me, normal sleep was 7 to 8 hours without waking up at all, just solid sleep. Or I thought I wasn't waking up. I'm sure I do wake up, but so anyway, fast forward again to 2019, I gave birth to my daughter. On no sleep, mind you, 20-hour unmedicated birth on 0 hours of sleep. So that was something I had to remind myself multiple times. I could do hard things on no sleep. And I, like a lot of new parents, I had a lot of postpartum anxiety and fear. I mean, you have kids. I'm a new mom. It's very overwhelming when you first have a baby. So I definitely started having some mom somnia. I would say I was very obsessive about sleep. I knew I was going to lose sleep. I felt protective over my sleep because I knew having a baby would mean, lost sleep. So that was, I almost wish I could, just typical life, wish I could have that knowledge I have now back then. Cause even though it's challenging, I think I would have enjoyed it a little more. I don't think I would have let it, control my life quite as much as it did. And of course, my daughter was a baby who didn't sleep. So irony, she just was one of those kids who didn't need a lot of sleep. So I even remember the sleep training. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I just saying it makes me like cringe now to think that you could train someone to sleep, right? But anyway, I let that go luckily early on because it just didn't really work for us. So anyway, we co-slept together. I was breastfeeding, so I was just waking up multiple times a night. I found it impossible to sleep when she slept. So I went basically 2 years with just, so somewhat insomnia. I mean, I would sleep, but it was very broken. I had a hard time falling asleep. I was obsessing over it. So then I weaned her off, and I went back to sleeping great again, completely normal, just the way I had for a few years in the past, how I had in the past. So moving forward again to the summer, this past summer of 2023.
So just a very quick comment on this,
Yeah.
this time where you had your baby was small and was still breastfeeding, etc. Was it mostly kind of like sleep disruption because of like her sleep during that year, or where there was a little bit component of insomnia, or not really?
There was a component of insomnia 100% because there was the disruption, but I couldn't fall asleep a lot of times because I knew, oh, I'm going to have to wake up and breastfeed in 2 hours or whatever it is. So I did start co-sleeping with her, which made a huge difference. And I think that kind of helped me to sleep a little bit better. So actually we still sleep together, but
Okay.
kind of goes into the story one day. But yeah, so
No,
yeah.
you wanted it for context, but that was very nice. But somehow then, that again sort of like fizzled out that struggle, it sounds like, and you're again sleeping well, right?
Yeah, because I weaned her off of breastfeeding. I think that was like a big part of it is I knew I wasn't going to be woken up anymore. So that was out of my head now. Yeah.
I totally get it. Like there was some sleep disruption there, but it was actually like the insomnia part here was kind of like the fear of not sleeping in the context of like the fear of having a sleep disruption because she was going to wake up, right?
Exactly.
And then that wasn't going to happen anymore. So nothing to worry about was kind of take the mind state there, right?
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So yes, that was just a little commentary, but yeah, you could take us further.
Sure. So then 2023, this last year's summer, was very stressful. We had those really devastating fires out here in Lahaina, and I was fortunate enough to not be personally affected, but we were evacuated. There were multiple fires on the island that night. So we were actually evacuated. We could see a fire right behind, our house. And we're seeing what's happening in Lahaina. We're looking on a map of where to go, and there's just fires everywhere around us. And that was really stressful. Actually, interestingly, we got evacuated, and I slept in this outdoor mall where my dad works. And I slept. I think I thought back to that period on this uncomfortable chair, and just anyway, I thought that was interesting thing. But yeah, that was really, really heartbreaking, really hard out here. We're such a community on Maui, and hearing the stories firsthand, seeing the devastation, it was traumatic. It was traumatic for pretty much everyone who lived here, even the ones that were lucky who didn't, lose their lives or family or pets or homes. So my dad also had emergency heart surgery that summer, and it was really scary experience. And then so all these things were accumulating, looking back on it. So then September of 2023, I was in my cousin's wedding in San Diego. So we flew out there. It was late at night. I knew the next morning we had a rehearsal. We landed in San Diego. And we had to drive like an hour and a half up to Temecula. And mind you, even though I'm from New Jersey, I live in Hawaii, where we have a 2-lane highway that's 55 miles per hour. So I don't know why my family thought I'm the designated driver. And so I get on the highway, and I'm like in NASCAR, and I'm so nervous, and I'm like sweating, and we get there really late. We don't get in bed until like midnight. I knew I had to get up early for this rehearsal, but for me, travel was always a thing. I've heard other people talk about this. So travel was always an issue. I usually brought some kind of herbal supplement with me for the first night. I tended not to sleep of where I was, or sleep very little. So I didn't sleep that night. Very little. I had a couple hours. I obsessed about it. I probably talked about it all day. I was seeing my family for the first time in years, being so far away. So I wanted to feel refreshed. I had a lot of pressure on feeling good for this day. So anyway, end up sleeping fine the rest of the trip. I have a great time at the wedding. It's super fun. But it was in my head a little like, God, that's, what? It's weird that I'm having that happen. So then about a month later, I decided to stop using cannabis, and I'm pretty long-term time user. So decided to just give it a little bit of a break. And I didn't actually notice any difference with my sleep off the bat. I was sleeping totally normal. I'm also a Reiki practitioner, and I had my first like official Reiki session coming up, and I was very nervous, even though I'd been practicing with friends and family. It felt like an exam almost. I was so nervous about it and way overthinking it, like just way overthinking it. So I ended up not sleeping. I surrender sleep was my biggest thing. Surrender sleep was definitely my biggest thing. So it would be, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, I'd finally just give up and fall asleep for a couple hours. So anyway, I didn't sleep. And then I thought, that's really weird. So now it's like really getting in my head now. So went back to sleeping again for a little while. Coming early December of 2023, when things kind of started really getting real for me. Again, a lot of financial stress. There's no tourism out here for a while. We lost a lot of our income. I love my in-laws. They were coming to stay with me in my condo, and just Christmas. And there's just a lot of stress accumulated at this point. And I wasn't using cannabis. So I don't think that cannabis makes you sleep, but I think that it is a way of dealing with anxiety. So I sort of had delegated that for my anxiety for a long time. So anyway, I started not being able to fall asleep early December of 2023. So sometimes it would just take a while. I'd fall asleep at 2 a.m. But now it's really in my head. I'm really starting to problem solve. I had a completely sleepless night before work one day, and I was a mess. It spiraled very quickly for me. I was up all night, all the hyperarousal, my heart racing, sweating, like almost having hot flashes, obsessing over the time, obsessing over what my next day would be like a lot of us. My next day's ruined. It's going to be terrible. How am I going to work? How am I going to do this? All these things. I would start chasing sleep quite a bit. In the morning, I would say, well, I only slept for, 2 hours. Of course I should be able to sleep in or take a nap. But that pressure was so high. Of course I couldn't sleep in or take a nap. So I was really panicked. I was very emotional. I was crying all the time. And when I say all the time, I mean all of the time I was crying. I have never cried more. I can smile about it now. but it truly was the worst thing I've ever been through, really the darkest experience I've ever been through. So I stopped doing what I love. I stopped doing my stand-up paddleboards. I'm also a yoga teacher, interestingly. And I was calling out of that quite a bit. I was isolating myself. I was definitely isolating myself. So, I have a 4-year-old daughter at this point, and I really loved hearing the story, Shelby's stories I just listened to, and how she talked about mom guilt. And I had major mom guilt. I hated her seeing me in this state. And, she is my greatest teacher, and just her compassion towards me. And it's going to be okay, mommy. She was so sweet, and, like, would give me a hug. Like, did you sleep last night? And so turning that back towards myself was a little more challenging for me to give that gift to myself. But, yeah, I went into a really dark, a really depressed state. I felt that I was a burden to my family, and I had some really scary thoughts about that. Like, would they be better off if I'm not here, because I'm such a burden and so sad. And so I did start going into the problem solving mode once again. I started with the melatonin, did nothing. Went to Unisom. So Unisom worked, or, I delegated it for a little bit. It would help. It's over-counter sleep aid. Interestingly, I started doing a lot of the guided meditations and relaxations. And again, ironically, I teach yoga, and that's sort of my passion, or my specialty, are these guided imagery and visualizations. And I end all of my classes with this. I think they're incredibly beneficial. I think they have so much healing can come from this deep state of relaxation, but I do not find them helpful for trying to sleep. That was one of the most torturous things I did to myself, was listen to these relaxations as a method, as a sleep effort, as a method to sleep. So, I would just be counting down the time. It had to be 10 minutes. Like, it's almost over. It's not working. And once in a while, I think it did help a little bit. It would take the hyperarousal down just a little bit, just laying and relaxing. And sometimes I would fall asleep after. But just like the apps, all those sleep apps, I really, really don't like. The only app is BedTyme. That's the app that you need if you're going through this. Not that I used it, but I've heard great things. But yeah, it just put pressure on me, and it just added to the whole struggle. So I went back to my naturopath, and he was helpful. People are just doing the best they can. They're not trained in this, and what to do for this. And I hope in the future that they are, thanks to you and your teachings. But so yeah, eventually it got really bad. I remember there was Christmas Eve, and everyone and we're having a party at my mom's house, and I didn't sleep at all the night before, and everyone was just having fun and laughing and enjoying. And I felt like a zombie. I felt almost out of my body at this point. And I hated myself. I hated myself for not being able to sleep. I thought, as a yoga teacher, especially, and I love Allie. I'm really loving Allie's teachings, and her story really resonated with me too. Like, I have the tools to do this. Like why, this is embarrassing. I'm having students fall asleep in my class. I'm almost having sleep envy for these students snoring in my class. I know what to do. Why am I going through this? So I just had so much self-hatred and loathing at this time. And I didn't feel understood. I didn't feel understood by anyone, And this is something, just quickly, that I'd like to note, because I thought this was really helpful for me, is to tell your family, tell your closest family members, your friends, to watch these talking insomnia stories that resonated with you, so they can really get an idea of what you're going through. It's all laid out so nicely that I think that's something that really did help me eventually. So anyway, Christmas Eve, I couldn't eat, which, I didn't mind losing weight, but that really wasn't the way that I wanted to go about losing weight. I was so anxious, and I didn't think I was a very anxious person. But turns out, I am a bit. So, but I do think a lot of this came on from the sleep anxiety. So throughout the day, I'd be thinking about it. It would come up and make my heart race. Like, what is it tonight? Am I not gonna be able to sleep tonight? What's going to happen? So it definitely went into my daily life. So I decided, I kept going in the bathroom and crying on Christmas. I was so sad. And I finally, after this is about a month of the struggle, which doesn't seem long compared to what people go through, but it felt long at the time. I decided to go to a regular primary care physician, which I knew in my heart was not the solution. I knew in my soul this was not the solution, but I just thought, maybe I could just get a little bit of sleep and things will get better. And you know what? She was a lovely person. She was a new doctor and she was such a lovely person. And, a lot of people don't receive the compassion that I received from her. She really took the time to listen and try to understand what I was going through. But again, she had good intentions, but she just wasn't trained in how to handle this. And actually, I had went back for another issue later, and I told her about you, and I told her about this sleep coach school, and she was like so stoked about it. She wrote it down. She was like, I have so many people struggling with sleep. I'm going to remember this. So I thought that was cool. She was open-minded to the whole thing. So she just prescribed me hydroxyzine, which is like a prescription Benadryl, I believe. So that worked for a little until it didn't work anymore. So then I went back again, maybe a week later. She prescribed trazodone, which is an SSRI. So I find that a little concerning that they're quick to prescribe this for sleep. I don't want to take an SSRI. I wasn't depressed prior to this experience. I don't know. I had a interesting relationship with that. I didn't want to take it. So I did take it, of course, out of desperation the one night, and I had a horrible experience. I don't know whether it was the hyperarousal or the pill itself, but I had a raging headache. Had a horrible taste in my mouth. I didn't sleep at all. And I thought, no way, I'm not taking these. So at this point, I'm ready to do whatever. I'm so desperate at this point. I will do whatever it takes. So I had a friend of a friend who had Ambien. So I really was terrified to take the Ambien. I know some people in my life who have used it, and I've heard a lot of really weird stories about Ambien, and I didn't want to do it. But again, I took it, and I was terrified to take it. I actually hid my car keys because I thought, well, what if I get up and drive my car? Not that really happens. I don't want to scare anyone, taking Ambien. I know someone who took Ambien forever is totally fine, so. But I was really scared. So I took it and I slept for like 5 to 6 hours. So I would sleep in between naturally too. I had a lot of pendulum, but it was not refreshing sleep. I mean, talk about, vivid dreams. I would have these firefighter awakenings. My heart would be racing, and still it would only be like a very short period considering I would wake up multiple times. So the Ambien gave me like a solid 5 to 6 hours. So I thought, I'm going to go get a prescription of this at this point. So I went back, and she was very hesitant, which I'm kind of grateful for, to prescribe this for me. She didn't want me on it long term. The same time, she actually gave me a referral to a therapist at the time. So I got the prescription. I filled it. I never ended up taking it. That night, my fiance and I went to a reggae concert. And at this point, I'm still not using cannabis, but I thought, what am I doing? I'm like, I'm going to take Ambien, but I'm not going to go use cannabis. I mean, this is at least a plant. This is something, I think has really beneficial healing effects. And when in Rome, I'm going to a reggae concert. I'm like, I'm just going to use cannabis again. I'm like, what, so, and I liked Romy's story too, because I hadn't heard a lot about that before. And he kind of talked a little bit about that also. Anyway, so I ended up having probably the worst and best night of my life that night. I had a little bit of both. Of course, the cannabis didn't work. I was putting so much pressure on this to put me to sleep. It didn't work. So I went out on my recliner, which was a big thing I did, my good old recliner. Even just looking at it right now, I'm like, oh man, this recliner. So that was something I did that actually my daughter, because I slept with her, she kind of put an end to, because she didn't want to be on the recliner with me. She would wake up and I wasn't in bed, and she would get upset. She's like, this isn't comfortable. Why are we on here? So anyway, so I was on the recliner, and I decided, it was probably like 4 a.m, and I was just, I was pretty just over it. I was just exhausted at this point, and just over the whole thing. And so I just decided to just meditate and get really quiet in my mind. And I went into my third eye, and I asked myself, what is causing this? What is causing this insomnia? And fear came up in my mind. And I said, okay, well, what is the solution? And, this is wild. I don't know if people will believe this. I know it's my truth, but swear to you, Daniel, in my head, I saw the word natto spelled out. And I didn't even know. I thought that was like NATO. And I had to Google what NATO even meant, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I'm like, it didn't make any sense to me. And I thought, like, wow, I'm really losing it. That was another fear I had, that I was just going to lose my mind and end up in a mental hospital. That was a real fear that I had. So I was so confused by that. I did Google it, I remember, but I don't know. I probably just wasn't the right time. And your book may have come up, but I don't know. It just wasn't, I didn't see it. And I remember seeing like some supplement, like nattokinase. I'm ready to take another supplement to add to my 40 supplements at this point. I'm glad I didn't order that. So then I went on in this really, really messed up state. I'm probably about 2 months in at this point. I was crying all the time. I was praying all the time. And I was on Reddit all the time. I still thought there was a chance that this was a cannabis withdrawal or something. And that I just, even even after using for a couple weeks again, I still thought, maybe it just hasn't kicked in, or I don't know. So I was researching, Reddit is a blessing and a curse, because I know a lot of your clients find you through there. So someone on there was like, enough people following this big train of, this big thread. He's like, you need to, I wish I knew who this was. I would go back and thank them, but they're like, you need to read Natto by Daniel Erickson and go to Sleep Coach School and check out this channel. And I was like, Natto, like, that's it, And honestly, I don't know if I think I would have been skeptical of you if I didn't have that vision in my mind that really encouraged me to keep going. And so I was like, wow, I need to read this. So I February 4th, because my YouTube history became just taken over by Sleep Coach School, which I'm so grateful for the content that you put on there. It's free. I mean, that's like unheard of. And I knew you are a good person. You have a good heart for you to be doing this and putting this content. You genuinely want to help people. So I just really thank you for that, because I really appreciate that. So even though I was in a little bit of denial still, I went on there and I started watching your This Is Natto playlist. And I immediately felt hope and relief. I just knew this was it. This was the solution. So, just right off the bat, just your simple basic teaching that my brain thinks being awake is a threat, the same way it would if there was a grizzly bear, a fire, whatever was going on. And it wants me to listen. And all of these mystery symptoms, this heart racing, sweating, heart palpitations, jerks, and also these hypnic jerks, like they're natural. My daughter has them all the time falling asleep. I have them too. So anyway, and really my brain was just a little confused. And that was a huge aha moment. No one had said this. It's like amazing. No one had told me this before. It's the truth, and the truth resonates. So I started, reading This Is Natto, which is all your books are amazing. I can't wait to continue to read your books. There's more I'd like to read. Tales of Courage, I really am excited to read. So yeah, and I started watching these stories. And I think one of the ones that really resonated with me immediately was Maja's story. So I was in the Whole Foods. Yeah, I was in the Whole Foods parking lot in my car. And I was just sitting there in disbelief. I'm sitting there and crying, and just like, I couldn't believe that there was someone who went through such a similar story. I had not talked to anyone like this. And I do have some people in my life who have gone through insomnia, but they've been going through insomnia for about 30 years. And so I really thought that was my fate. And, they didn't quite have the response that I did, this severe anxiety and depression, or maybe they had in the past and not so much anymore. So I did really feel, alone. So these stories are just so amazing for that reason. I felt so much less alone. And I'm so thankful to all of the people who came on here and had the courage. And for a while I was making a list, but I could just do a whole podcast on the list of people, because there's so many. But I do want to give a little shout out, if that's okay, to some of the people that really helped me. So Maja was, of course, one of them. Kristen, I loved her story. Abby really hit me. Sonia, is that her name?
Sonia,
I might have.
Sonia.
Sonia, but also the one who was on TED Talk.
Yeah, that's her, Sonia.
Oh, that's
Sonia
her. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, she was really lovely, really great. And all of these coaches, they're just amazing. They're incredible. Of course, Alina and the Fearless Her channel. I mean, just incredible. Her newsletter. She's can't say enough good things about her, and Coach Michelle and Veronica and Chris, and then all these new coaches you have just been bringing so much to the table. Again, I really love Allie's take, and Christian and Richard. There's so many gifted people, so much knowledge and wisdom really helped me. And that's really where the bumpy recovery roller coaster began. So this is back in February. The first thing that really helped me was the befriending wakefulness. This was huge for me. I would just stay there and suffer and torture myself. And I would lay on the other side of the bed and lay upside down. I would have hung upside down outside if I would have done anything. So, just this permission to do something that I like. Wow. And I have a 4-year-old, so I don't get to do a lot of things I like. We're busy. We're watching My Little Pony and doing these things. And I'm a closet reality show, like dating show fan. I guess I'm not a closet fan anymore, but I love these shows. And the trashier they are, the more I love them. So I started giving myself permission to watch these shows. If I couldn't, even just the thought of allowing myself to watch a show, I fell asleep. But then my brain was like, okay, you're bluffing, are you really going to do this? So I started doing that. So that was great. And then one of my biggest things that really helped me with befriending wakefulness is I would go outside. I'm very fortunate. I mean, I live in a beautiful tropical climate, but I also live across from the ocean. So off my lanai, which is like our decks here, we call them lanais. I live upstairs, and I would sit outside, and it was so beautiful. I would just listen to nature. I would look at the stars. I would do stargazing, which I never did before. I never, looked at the stars at night. I would look at the moon. I would listen to the ocean. And I didn't love it. I'm not going to act like I loved it. I wanted to be sleeping. I didn't want to be out there. I would be emotional still. I would be crying still. It's not like this is a long journey. This wasn't like I found this channel and I went back to sleeping great. I mean, there was an immediate improvement, 100%. But it was hard. It's very hard. Sometimes it's still hard. So, and sometimes, it was lonely and it was frustrating throughout the recovery. So my biggest thing, that really helped me was allowing my emotions, was having the courage to be uncomfortable, to accept how I am feeling. I don't have to love it. Just like Allie's new video, you don't have to love it to heal it. I didn't have to love it. But can I allow it? Can I just allow it to be there with me? So, this is also, I teach yin yoga, and this is a principle of yin yoga. This is really this chance to embody these teachings that I preach and practice for years. And, yin yoga is a very slow and meditative style of yoga where you go into a pose and then you find your depth or your edge of the stretch where resistance starts to arise, whether that's physical or emotional resistance. And then you pause and you become still and you allow and you observe. And, over time, doing this, having the stillness and the softness, you let go of tension in your body. What it does is it creates more mobility in the body. It makes your connective tissue stronger and longer, and it gives you more vitality. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Instead of resisting and fighting and trying to change this experience, which I had been doing for so long, can I just let it be here? Can I let these emotions be here, these sensations? Can I feel it? Can I observe it? And actually the book, Letting Go by David R. Hawkins, I heard Alina talking about that with her podcast with Michelle, which I loved, about recovery. Talks a lot about this too. And I found that was interesting. So really it's just the strength and softness in surrender. So yeah, that was hugely beneficial for me. And then the timeless thing took me a while to do. This timeless method was really challenging for me. I was really holding on to control. I'm definitely a bit of a control freak. I was holding on to control about the illusion of control I thought I had by checking the time. So I still go timeless. Being timeless has actually become a little bit of a sleep effort for me, which I know you've talked about before. And the other night I'm like, I'm looking at the clock. I don't care what time it is. And I was fine. I went back to sleep. It wasn't even a big deal, right? But I do notice I'm still a little bit of fear around seeing the time. And there were things that going on around my condo that I knew the time anyway. There was a sprinkler that went off at 12:30. There was a truck that would start at 4:30. So both those sounds were like, the worst sounds to me. Even now when I hear the sprinkler, my heart starts. I go, okay, it's just a sprinkler. It's not dangerous. It's okay. So yeah. But going timeless was huge. So slowly I started seeing recovery. I had a lot of pendulum still, a lot of surfer window in the beginning, riding that wave of sleep. If I didn't fall asleep before 11, I would be up all night. The sleep maintenance thing, it was interesting. That kind of started trickling in where that had been an issue because usually if I fell asleep, it's interesting. Like once I was asleep, I was like, oh, okay, the relief was there. Even if I woke up, I'm like, I already slept. So I'd fall back asleep. Even the somnophobia, I find this so fascinating because I still go through this a little bit of somnophobia at night and this lingering fear. And, I only have it at night when I'm going to fall asleep. Like if I wake up in the middle of the night, I want to go back to sleep. I have no fear of falling back to sleep. So I find that kind of interesting. Um, yeah, so I started, just going down this recovery path, seeing improvement. I started to go back to work. I decided, I'm going to live my life. I was really inspired by all the people on this channel. I thought, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to go back to doing what I love. I went back to horseback riding. I went back to working on the water. The alarm was a struggle for me. It's still sometimes is a little bit. I still sleep, but it still is a little bit in my head. I did have a sleepless night where I worked, and guess what? I was fine. I was totally fine. Um, and of course, I've had a ton of speed bumps over this journey, and that's your channel has been so helpful with that. And these speed bumps are just like so necessary. There's such an opportunity to show your brain that it is safe to be awake, and they suck. And I was so disappointed and so upset. And the longer stretch I'd have with sleep, and then I'd have a speed bump, the more disappointed I'd be. Like, what am I doing wrong? Did I lose it? Am I going to go back to this place again? And a lot of the fear would come up. But you said, you know what? I'm just going to live my life. And so I went camping. That was a big thing. I was very worried about that. And I just went into it like, if I sleep, I sleep. If not, I'll go sit outside the tent and look at the moon. Again, I'm by the ocean. It's beautiful. It's fine. And I think I actually slept better than everyone I was with, ironically, that trip. So it was like really good timing that it turned out to be a month later when we were talking, divine timing. But I had a pretty good speed bump. And that next day I was sad. I was disappointed. I only slept a couple hours. And so I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to be really kind to myself today. The self-kindness, one of these biggest lessons in this journey. I've been very critical to myself my whole life. So I ended up going to get ice cream with my daughter. And then we went to the movies, and it's just dark and calm. I could close my eyes if I wanted to and can eat snacks and just chill out. And actually we saw Inside Out 2, which was about anxiety. So I thought that was really interesting. It like really hit home for me, And I went back to sleeping fine. Most nights I sleep anywhere from, I'd say, like 5 to 8 hours. That's another thing. I don't need near as much sleep as I thought I needed. There were nights where I slept 11 hours and I felt terrible, and nights where I slept 4 and it was fine. So that actually is a quote from Alina in her newsletter that really resonated with me, because I had to stop and be like, kind of that arrival fallacy that you had just talked about with Brady. I'm loving those conversations with Brady, because it's kind of where I am on my journey, where he is, and that really really aligned a lot of what you're talking about. This arrival fallacy that like everything's going to be perfect once I sleep again. There's going to be no struggles or challenges in my life, which of course it's weird how your brain does that. Of course it's not true. Of course there's always going to be these things. Life was not perfect before insomnia. So I really resonated with one of Alina's quotes from her newsletter, and that was I had to ask myself, what do I want? What do I really want here? I'm sleeping fine. What is it that is missing? What do I want? And she said, I want peace of mind. I want freedom. I want ease. And I want not to exert so much effort. And I was the real aha moment for me. I thought that's exactly it. Exactly it. So yeah. Here I am. Maybe I've been on this journey longer than I've actually struggled with insomnia. It's been, probably 6 months. And that's another thing, just letting go of this time deadline. It is what it is. It's going to take as long as it takes. And I do have faith that there will be a day where it's not in my mind anymore. I have my life back. It's not anywhere what it was then, but it's still there a little bit. There's, sometimes I lay there at night. I have a little thing now with the sleep effort with my phone, with watching shows. I've heard other people talk about this. I know I can fall asleep without it. I have, just on accident before with my daughter, but yeah, kind of a thing with my phone, watching my shows. And then when I decide to put that away, I do almost every night have a little moment of panic. But again, I let it be there. Even telling this story, I had when I went to kind of write out my story and find it really healing to write about things. And I was really nervous, and I had to just sit there and I'm like, let this feeling be here. Why am I so nervous about this? Why am I even doing this? I don't have to do this. You're not forcing me to do this. I'm only doing it to pay it forward, to give hope to someone out there who's really in a dark place. And I just let the fear be there. I let the discomfort be there. And I just realized it was a fear of not being good enough. And this perfectionism just kind of rising back up to the surface. So this tool has been, so incredible. And I see myself as an infinite student. It just, put me on this path of growth and of this continuing down this spiritual path. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I kind of took note in my mind of the fact that I haven't interjected or asked you a question for probably like 20 minutes, because you tell the story in such a wonderful way with so much insight. And I think that, this is going to help so many people in our community. And, I was thinking of a few things that I kind of picked up on. This is a little bit random, but like you mentioned like the sleep training, and that you kind of realized that that's probably not the way. I had the exact same experience myself with our first son. I was like, okay, this is it. He's so many months now. We're going to sleep train him. And in retrospect, I'm like, why did I do that? Like, we understand, like, how could I think that I could like make him sleep? But anyway, I just remember having this experience. But okay, so maybe a few questions for you. One is like you've already touched on so many amazing insights, and we already talked sort of about what I'm about to ask you about. But if you could maybe travel back in time and tell yourself one thing when you were really struggling, what would you pick?
Gosh, I would tell myself to read Natto immediately as soon as possible. No, I think there's a timing. I think there's a timing to life, a mystery to life that, just when the time is right, the time is right. But I would give that girl a hug. And that is something I did. I would hug myself. I think maybe Alina or someone had talked about that, and just really give myself that compassion and that love. And I would tell myself to be kind, to be patient, and that this is temporary, because there was a period where I thought, this is it. This is my whole life is going to be this struggle. This is temporary. You are going to get your life back, and it's going to be better than you imagined.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
And I guess before we finish off for today, I just remembered that you kind of I think you had a question for me, maybe about vivid dreams or something like that.
Yeah.
Or other questions, anything.
No. Yeah. I did also just want to talk about something else that I took from this experience.
Yeah.
It's just I really feel it, that it was a way that it happened for me and not to me, that it was just a way to really be on this path of freedom and peace. And it was really my greatest teacher, and it was very profound and powerful, your teachings, and they really continue to affect me. But I'm so sorry. The question about the vivid dreams. Yes. So, what do you think about vivid dreams, Daniel? Because like, I still am a little bit of a vivid dreamer, and I've actually had dreams that were premonitions, and I know in some cultures and beliefs, like dreams can be interpreted and have meaning. So do you think they're all just hyper arousal, or, I'm curious. I don't know what your take is on it.
Yeah. I'm just going to say right off the bat, to be honest with you, that I don't think I can add very much as far as dreams to think, or what people in general think. I can just say that, they are something very, very mysterious. There's something very mysterious, and everyone, like, and I'll say one more thing, which is that, again, people can have like very, what I observed that I think could add value to this conversation is that we again can think very differently of dreams. Like, to some people, they had like this, they haven't been sleeping well for a long time, and then they're like, oh, Daniel, like, now I have dreams again. I have these vivid dreams, and I'm like out exploring. Wow. And like, to me, and to that person, that means like when they're kind of these vivid dreams are back, that means now I'm sleeping well again, right? Another person can say like, oh, I'm not having those dreams anymore. Now I'm sleeping
Yeah.
well, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the vivid dreams are gone. Now I'm sleeping well. So
Right.
it's kind of like people can have completely different kind of relationship with dreams, and I think,
Right.
that's something very interesting.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It is mysterious. It's something we'll further explore. Um, but really, I know how humble you are, Daniel. I know you're just anytime, but I just really can't express my gratitude enough to you for these teachings. They're just incredibly valuable. You're such a gift that what you offer is such a gift to humanity. And I'm just so excited to continue to follow you. And, I've struggled with OCD, so I applied a lot of these teachings to this which have been helpful. But I know that's kind of what you're moving into now is, more anxiety and OCD. So I'm so excited to read your future books and see where it takes you. But you gave me my life back. I mean, it's like I just like I can't thank you enough for that. I mean, there's just no greater gift. And honestly, I want to pay it forward. I said that throughout this experience. I sort of bargained a little, but I promised that I would help other people. So I'm definitely interested in your coaching program at some point. I'd love to learn more about that. If it aligns and works out, then great. Also kind of natto. And actually, interestingly, my fiance last night, we were talking about this, and he's like, you've become a lot more natto in your parenting. So it's also benefited me in that way. It's like, you don't fight with her as much about doing her hair. She's a very strong-willed kid, or wearing this outfit. And I'm like, you're right. I mean, I'm natto in all things, thank you for your wife for that. I'd also love to see an interview with your wife. I don't know, how open she is, but it sounds like she has a lot of wisdom and influence. And yeah, that's just something I thought of. But yeah, and there's a song that I'd love for other people to listen to. There's this Modest Yahoo song called Fireproof. And I mean, I just feel like that's my soundtrack now because I do feel fireproof after this experience. I'm excited, I'm optimistic about my future, and I'm curious. I mean, it's so fascinating. This whole experience is so fascinating to go through, and as horrible as it was at the time, I am grateful for it, and so grateful for you and all the coaches and community of Sleep Coach School.
Oh, and it's so heartwarming. And, I often say that, like, hearing what you just said is like, that's the gas that always keeps the tank
Mm,
full. It truly is. And, you were mentioning so many people that have been guests before, and now people are going to watch you, and they're going to be inspired. They're going to find hope. And then and I truly believe this is how we can really make a difference in the world. So yeah,
absolutely.
huge thank you to and I think I can sense that you have a lot to share that's really helpful. So maybe you'll be back
Yeah,
another time and we can talk more.
I would love that. I would love that.
Sounds wonderful. Well, thanks so much for now, and thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah.
Aloha.
Aloha.
They say that the best things in life are free. And I truly hope that this free video helps you rediscover something else that is free, which is peaceful sleep. If you do find our content here helpful, then please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it with people, because the more views we get, the more people we reach, the more chances of changing lives we have. The thing is, leaving insomnia for good is actually so simple. You can and will rediscover a beautiful life at the end of this sleepless tunnel. So yes, please share it with people, hit the subscribe button, and you will be a big part of leading the change that we so want to see in the sleep universe. Thank you.